On a warm southern night, under the hum of crickets and the glow of bar lights, a quiet man heard a woman sing like she was bleeding through every note. Rusty didn't just fall for her song, he fell into her silence, the kind that holds secrets tighter than a locked barn door. June had a past that crept like fog, slow but sure, and when it rolled in, it brought trouble knocking hard. Love met danger on A. The night Rusty first saw June, the air was warm and thick, like the kind that holds on to your shirt and won't let go. The old wooden bar sat at the edge of town, tucked between a field of wild sunflowers and a broken fence that had seen better days. Folks called it Harlan's Place, and it was where lonely hearts went to forget what they didn't want to remember. Rusty had just finished a long day hauling lumber, his hands sore, his boots dusty. He wasn't looking for love. He wasn't looking for anything at all. But then she stepped onto the stage. June. She had a red dress that hugged the light and caught every pair of eyes in the room. Her voice floated out soft at first, then strong, like honey sliding down a fiddle string. Rusty couldn't look away. Every word she sang carried a shadow, like there was a story buried deep beneath the melody. Folks clapped, some whistled, but Rusty just sat there, his beer untouched. When she finished, she didn't smile like other singers. She gave a small nod, eyes scanning the crowd like she was making sure someone wasn't there. He didn't know it yet, but that night was the start of something that would change everything. A story that would whisper through the town like wind through the pines, leaving hearts stirred and secrets unearthed. The next night Rusty came back. He told himself it was just for the music, but his boots carried him faster than his thoughts. The bar was buzzing, the same warm glow spilling from the windows. June was on stage again, this time singing a slow tune about a train that never came. Her voice cracked just once, on the word home, and Rusty felt something twist inside him. When she stepped off stage, he followed her outside, where the night smelled like rain on old dirt. "You sing real nice," he said, shy but steady. She gave him a look that was half a smile, half a warning. "Thank you," she whispered, "but don't get too close, cowboy. Some songs ain't meant to be danced to." He laughed softly. "I wasn't asking for a dance." She stared at him a moment longer, as if trying to read the lines written on his face. Then she turned and walked toward the alley behind the bar. Rusty stood there, confused, but something in his gut told him that behind that voice was a story wrapped in thorns, and he'd just brushed against it. By the third night, Rusty wasn't pretending anymore. He sat in the same corner seat, the one with the wobbly leg and the good view of the stage. June sang a faster song that night, her feet tapping, her curls bouncing. The crowd cheered louder than usual, but Rusty noticed something no one else seemed to. Her eyes weren't shining. They were scanning the room again, like a watchman at a gate. After the show, she slipped out the side door, and this time Rusty followed. He didn't know why. Maybe it was the way her voice held secrets, or maybe it was because he'd been lonely too long. Behind the bar was a quiet stretch of gravel road. June leaned against the wall, lighting a cigarette with shaking hands. Rusty stepped closer. "You okay?" She froze, then gave him that same half smile. "I'm fine. Just like to be alone after singing." But Rusty saw the bruise peeking out from under her sleeve. Not fresh, but not old either. His heart thudded like boots on a wooden porch. He didn't ask about it. Not yet. But the picture in his head started to shift. June wasn't just a singer. She was a storm waiting to break. A week passed, and Rusty kept showing up. Folks at the bar started whispering, "That lumberman's got eyes for June," they'd say, chuckling over their beers. Rusty didn't care. Every night he came, and every night she warned him with that same quiet smile. "Don't get too close." One night after her set, a man in a black hat walked in. He wasn't from around there. His boots were too clean, his stare too sharp. June saw him before Rusty did, and the color drained from her face like water slipping through cracks. She rushed off stage mid-song, leaving the crowd murmuring. Rusty followed her to the back again, but this time the door was locked. He heard her breathing hard on the other side. "June," he called softly. No answer. The man in the black hat leaned against the bar, watching the door she'd vanished behind. His grin was slow and mean, like a snake warming in the sun. Rusty's hands curled into fists. Something was happening. Something deep. And he was standing at the edge of it. The next evening, June didn't sing. The bar felt different without her voice. Quieter. Heavier. Rusty asked Harlan, the owner, where she was. Said she's taking a break, Harlan muttered. But his eyes flicked to the side like he knew more. Rusty went to the alley, hoping she'd be there. Instead, he found her sitting behind the dumpster, knees drawn up, shoulders shaking. He stepped closer. June. She looked up, mascara smeared, eyes red. You shouldn't have followed me. I can't just pretend I don't see, Rusty said. Tell me what's going on. She shook her head fiercely. You don't understand. Some things follow you no matter how far you run. Some songs keep playing even when the music stops. Rusty knelt down. Then let me listen. For the first time, her walls cracked. A single tear slid down her cheek, catching the dim alley light. She didn't tell him everything, not yet, but she didn't push him away either. And somewhere in that quiet corner of the night, a thread tied between them. Fragile, trembling, but real. The days rolled by like an old wagon on a dusty road. June didn't return to the stage right away, but Rusty kept showing up. Sometimes he'd find her outside the bar, sitting on the back steps with her guitar on her lap, fingers tracing strings but never playing. She didn't say much. Neither did he. Sometimes, silence speaks louder than songs. One evening, she let him sit beside her. The sky was streaked pink and gold, cicadas buzzing in the trees. Why do you keep coming back? She asked, not looking at him. Rusty shrugged. Because your songs got something in them I can't shake off. Like when a train whistle echoes in your chest long after it's gone. She gave a small laugh, the kind that hides a tear. Trains leave. That's what they do. He leaned forward. Not all of them. She turned to him then, really turned. Like she was trying to see if his words had roots. Her lips parted like she might say something, but footsteps echoed behind them. Rusty glanced back. It was the man in the black hat, watching from the shadows. June stiffened, clutching her guitar tight. The moment broke like thin glass, and before Rusty could speak, she disappeared inside, leaving him staring at the stranger's cold grin. Rusty started asking questions. Folks in town didn't know much about June. She'd arrived 2 years ago, singing like a night breeze, and never spoke about where she came from. Harlan said she paid rent on time, kept to herself, and sang like a woman chasing away ghosts. Rusty visited the old train station one morning, thinking about what she'd said. He found an old station master sweeping the platform. You ever see a woman with red hair and a voice like silk come through here 2 years back? Rusty asked. The old man nodded slowly. Came off the night train. No luggage but that guitar. Looked like someone who left everything behind, or had it taken. Rusty felt something settle heavy in his chest. June wasn't just hiding. She was running. And the man in the black hat wasn't just a stranger passing through. He was a shadow from the place she left behind. When Rusty returned to the bar that night, the man was there again, sitting at the counter, eyes fixed on the door like a wolf waiting on a rabbit trail. Rusty sat 2 stools away, his jaw tight. He didn't know the story yet, but he could feel it coming like a storm crawling over the horizon. June came back to the stage the next evening. Her voice was different, not soft, not sweet. It was sharp, trembling, like a violin string pulled too tight. She sang a song Rusty had never heard before, about a girl who fell in love with a man who wore lies like perfume. Her hands shook as she held the microphone. The man in the black hat didn't clap when she finished. He just stood slowly, tipped his hat, and walked out. June's eyes followed him like a deer spotting a hunter. Rusty met her outside after the show. Who is he? He asked. Her face went pale. Someone I hoped I'd never see again. Rusty waited, but she didn't say more. She walked past him like a ghost with unfinished business. But something in her eyes told him the truth was clawing its way out. Later that night, Rusty lay awake, listening to the wind push against his window. He thought of June's shaking hands, that sharp song, and the man's cold stare. He didn't know how deep her story went, but he knew he was already tangled in it. One night, Rusty followed the man. He didn't tell June. He just waited outside the bar, leaning against his truck, until the stranger stepped out and headed down the gravel road toward the edge of town. Rusty kept his distance, boots crunching softly. The man stopped at a payphone near the gas station. Rusty crouched behind an old crate, listening. "She's here," the man said. His voice was low, smooth. "Told you she couldn't hide forever. Yeah, I'll handle it." Rusty's heart thudded. Handle it? What did that mean? When the man hung up and turned, his eyes swept the dark like he could smell Rusty's breath. Rusty ducked low, his pulse roaring in his ears. The man's boots clicked closer, then stopped. A match flared. Cigarette lit. Slow exhale. Rusty didn't move until the man walked away. His hands were shaking. He didn't know who they were, but June was in danger. That much was clear. And now he was part of the game, whether he liked it or not. Rusty found June behind the bar again the next evening. She sat on the steps, guitar beside her. But this time her shoulders weren't just heavy, they were trembling. "I followed him," Rusty said quietly. Her head snapped up. "You what?" "I heard him. He called somebody. Said you couldn't hide forever." June buried her face in her hands. "You shouldn't have done that." "Why? Who is he?" She lifted her head slowly. Her eyes were wet, but fierce. "His name's Clyde. He used to be my husband." The words hit Rusty like a punch. June's voice dropped to a whisper. "I left him 2 years ago. He wasn't just cruel. He was dangerous. I ran in the middle of the night. Thought I was free." Rusty reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "You don't understand, Rusty. Clyde doesn't let go. And now he knows where I am." The night air grew cold around them. A dog howled somewhere in the distance. Rusty realized this wasn't just a love story. It was a showdown waiting to happen. The next morning, the town woke up to a sky heavy with gray clouds. Rusty sat on his porch with a cup of coffee, staring out at the road like it might give him answers. He kept hearing June's words over and over. "Clyde doesn't let go." It rattled in his chest like a loose nail on a barn door. He couldn't just stand by. He drove into town and asked around. Most folks didn't know Clyde, but one old mechanic leaned close and said, "That man? He's trouble. Saw him down by Miller's Bridge late last night. Ain't no reason to be there unless you're planning something." Rusty's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. Miller's Bridge was out by the train tracks. Quiet, dark, the kind of place nobody goes after sundown. He drove out there, his headlights slicing through the mist. At the bridge, he saw fresh tire marks in the mud. He stepped out, listening. The only sound was the creak of the bridge under the wind. But something told him Clyde was laying tracks of his own, and Rusty had just stepped onto dangerous ground. June didn't sing that night. She came to the bar but stayed in the back room, away from the lights. Rusty found her sitting on a wooden crate, hands clasped like someone praying for a miracle. "I went to the bridge," Rusty said. Her head snapped up. "Why?" "Because Clyde was there. Folks said they saw him. He's planning something." She shook her head slowly. "He's not planning. He's waiting." Rusty crouched down beside her. "You don't have to face him alone." She laughed bitterly. "Rusty, you don't know him. Clyde doesn't fight fair. He breaks things. People, dreams, lives. He broke me once. I won't let him break you too." Rusty placed a hand on her shoulder. "Maybe I don't know him, but I know you ain't running anymore. And neither am I." She stared at him, something flickering behind her eyes. Hope, maybe, or fear dressed up like it. Either way, a bond was tightening between them, like two vines twisting around the same old fence post. Clyde began appearing everywhere. Rusty saw him at the gas station, leaning against the pump, cigarette dangling like a warning. He saw him outside Harlan's place, watching the door but never going in. He even saw him parked near the church, staring straight ahead, engine idling. June's hands shook every time she caught sight of him. Her singing became softer, almost hollow, like she was singing to keep the dark at bay. Folks started whispering, "Who's that man? Why's June look so scared?" The town was small. Whispers spread like smoke. One evening, Rusty walked June to her small rented house by the edge of town. The night was thick, crickets singing low. "I can't live like this," she said, stopping on her porch. always waiting for him to strike. Rusty stepped closer. Then we don't wait. We face him. She looked up sharply. You don't understand. I do. He cut in gently. He wants to scare you back into the cage. But cages only work if you stop fighting. Her eyes filled with tears. But this time, they weren't from fear. They were from a memory of strength she thought she'd lost. Rusty didn't know what would happen next, but he knew he'd stand beside her when it came. The confrontation came sooner than either of them expected. One night, June finished her set early. Rusty was waiting by the bar door when Clyde stepped out of the shadows like he'd been carved from the night itself. June, Clyde drawled, his voice smooth as oil on gravel. Ain't you gonna say hello to your husband? The whole bar went quiet. Even the jukebox seemed to hold its breath. June froze. Rusty stepped in front of her. She ain't your wife anymore. Clyde's grin widened. Who's this? Her new guard dog. Rusty didn't flinch. Her friend. Clyde took a step closer, his boots echoing. Friend. Huh? You got no idea what you're getting into, boy. Rusty's fists itched, but he held steady. Clyde leaned close enough for Rusty to smell the smoke on his breath. This ain't over. Then he turned and walked out, leaving a trail of silence behind him. June's hands were ice cold. He's testing you, she whispered. Next time, he won't use words. Rusty knew she was right. The storm wasn't coming. It had arrived. The night after the showdown, June didn't sleep. She paced her small living room, guitar lying silent in the corner. Rusty stayed on her porch, leaning against the railing, watching the stars like a man waiting for trouble. Rusty, she said softly through the screen door. Why are you doing this? He turned. Because nobody should have to fight alone. She stepped outside, the moonlight catching the worry on her face. I left that life to survive. I didn't expect anyone to stand beside me. Not anymore. Rusty reached out and took her hand, firm but gentle. Then maybe it's time you stop just surviving. Maybe it's time you live. For a long moment, the world went still. The cicadas hushed. Even the wind held its breath. Something shifted between them that night. Not loud, not sudden, but steady, like roots finding their way deep into the earth. Neither of them knew what Clyde's next move would be, but they knew they'd face it together. The night after Clyde grabbed her wrist, the town felt different. Even the air seemed tighter, like it was waiting for something to snap. Rusty stayed at June's house, sitting out on the porch with a lantern and his old hunting knife beside him. Crickets sang, owls hooted, but under it all was a silence too heavy to ignore. Inside, June couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, guitar on her lap, fingers plucking at strings she wasn't really hearing. Memories crept in like shadows under a door. Clyde's hands, his voice, the way he'd twisted love into something sharp. Rusty glanced back through the window. You all right? She shook her head. He's getting closer. I can feel it. Rusty leaned back in his chair, boots planted firm. Then let him come. He's not the only one with fire in his bones. For the first time, June smiled. Not a small, broken smile. A real one. Faint, but real. And though the night stretched long, she didn't feel as alone anymore. Somewhere out there, Clyde was watching. But Rusty was waiting too. The next morning brought a brittle kind of calm. June made coffee while Rusty fixed a loose hinge on her porch door. The sun came up slow, sliding over the trees, but Rusty's gut told him the peace wouldn't last. Later that day, Harlan sent word that Clyde had been asking questions around town. About Rusty, about June's schedule, about where she lived. Folks were uneasy. Some warned Rusty to back off. He's dangerous, they whispered. Men like him don't fight clean. Rusty just nodded. He knew, but backing off wasn't an option anymore. That evening, June sang a soft song at the bar. Not for the crowd, but for herself. Her voice floated low and sure, like someone reclaiming a piece of her soul. Rusty watched from his corner, eyes scanning every face that came through the door. Clyde didn't show, and that worried him even more. When snakes go quiet, they're not gone. They're coiling. 2 nights later, Clyde made his move. It started with the power going out at June's house. 1 second, the lights were glowing warm. The next, everything went black. June gasped. Rusty jumped to his feet, lantern in hand. "Stay here," he whispered. He stepped outside, every sense sharp. The night was thick, the moon hidden behind clouds. Then he heard it, a slow crunch of gravel near the porch steps. "Clyde," Rusty called. "I know you're out there." Silence. Then a low chuckle, cold as creek water. Rusty gripped the lantern tighter. "You come any closer, and you'll regret it." The footsteps stopped. Then Clyde's voice floated out of the darkness. "You can't keep her from me, boy. She was mine long before you came around." Rusty's jaw clenched. "She's not yours anymore." But by the time he stepped off the porch, Clyde was gone. Just shadows and wind remained. Rusty felt the chill run down his spine. This wasn't random anymore. Clyde was circling closer, testing the edges. The next day, June went to the sheriff's office. Rusty stood beside her as she told her story, voice shaking but strong. She showed the note, spoke about the nights he followed her, the blackout, the threats. The sheriff, a tired man with years in his eyes, listened carefully. "I can file a restraining order," he said. "But men like Clyde don't always respect paper." June's hands trembled in her lap. Rusty spoke up. "Then we'll do what we have to." The sheriff nodded slowly. "Just be careful. He's smart, and desperate men make the worst kind of trouble." As they left the station, June took Rusty's hand. "I don't want you to get hurt because of me," she whispered. Rusty squeezed back. "You didn't bring this trouble, June. He did. And I'm not going anywhere." She looked at him with something between fear and trust. The kind of look people give when they're standing at the edge of something they can't see the bottom of. Friday night came again, and with it, a feeling that the air itself was holding its breath. The bar was half full, quieter than usual. Folks had heard whispers, felt the storm building. June wore her red dress again, not out of vanity, but defiance. She sang with fire. Her voice filled the room like wind through tall grass, bending but not breaking. Rusty watched the door. Every creak made his heart jump. Then Clyde walked in. He didn't sit this time. He walked straight toward the stage, slow, like a snake sliding through dry leaves. The crowd stiffened. June's voice wavered for the first time, but she didn't stop singing. Rusty rose from his chair. Clyde reached the foot of the stage and just stared at her, eyes burning. When she finished the song, he tipped his hat and whispered something Rusty couldn't hear. June's face went pale. Before Rusty could reach him, Clyde slipped back into the night like smoke. June stumbled off stage. "He said," her voice cracked. "He said he's coming for me tomorrow night." Rusty held her close as the room buzzed with whispers. Tomorrow night. The line had been drawn. Rusty didn't sleep that night. He lay on the old couch with the lamp burning low, the scent of pine and cigarette smoke tangled in the air. Outside, the crickets kept their steady song, but inside him was a storm that wouldn't hush. June had told him everything, every wound, every betrayal, every ghost that clung to her voice when she sang. And Rusty, with his calloused hands and tender heart, held it like something holy and fragile. He knew he couldn't change her past. But maybe, just maybe, he could help her face it. At dawn, he got up, washed his face with cold water, and stared at his reflection. "It's time," he whispered. "It's time to stop running." He drove to the bar before it opened. The stage was empty, chairs still upside down on tables. He stood there a while, remembering the first night he heard her sing, that soft ache wrapped in melody. Then he called the sheriff. He called the lawyer. He called the old friend who owed him a favor. Rusty was tired of half-truths and shadows. He wanted light. That evening, when June walked in, hair tied back and eyes cautious, he met her at the door. "June," he said, voice steady as a church bell, "we ain't hidin' no more." June's hands trembled when she saw the sheriff. Old memories rose like ghosts, whispering of nights when she was cornered, when men in uniforms didn't save her. But Rusty didn't flinch. He stood by her side like a rooted oak. "They're here for the truth," he told her, his eyes locked on hers. "And I'll be right here." The sheriff stepped forward, hat in hand, respectful. "Ma'am, we're reopening the case. Got new evidence." You ain't the one in trouble. You're the one we shoulda listened to a long time ago. June's throat tightened. For so long, she had run from that night, from the man who hurt her, from the town that turned its head. But now, the truth was pushing through like sunlight through shutters. She told her story again. Not through song this time, but through plain words. Each sentence felt like tearing open an old wound, but Rusty's hand was there, warm and steady. When she finished, the sheriff nodded. We'll handle the rest, he said. And for the first time in years, June felt a small, trembling kind of peace. News spread through town like wildfire. Folks who had once whispered behind June's back now looked at her with wide, uneasy eyes. The bar owner apologized. Old friends resurfaced with guilty smiles. But June didn't chase their approval. She had something stronger now, her own voice, unshackled. Rusty watched her at the bar that weekend. She sang again, but this time, her song wasn't laced with pain. It was strong, full, rising like a river after a long drought. People stood still to listen. Even the rowdy regulars hushed. Rusty leaned back, boots on the rail, hat tilted low, heart swelling. He didn't need fancy words to know what was happening. She was healing. But not everyone was happy. The man who had hurt her, the one who had thought she'd stay silent forever, was back in town. He watched from the shadows, anger burning. And Rusty felt it before he saw it. Trouble was coming, slow but sure, like a storm rolling over the hills. The night it happened was thick with heat. The crickets were loud, the moon was low, and Rusty was closing up the bar after June's set. She was laughing, lighter than he'd ever seen her. But outside, in the gravel lot, headlights flared. A truck door slammed. Rusty's gut tightened. The man stepped out, older now, but mean in the eyes. June, he drawled. We got unfinished business. Rusty moved in front of her, hands loose but ready. You got nothing here, he said. The man sneered. She's mine. No, June said, her voice ringing clear and strong. I ain't yours. Not then. Not now. Not ever. The man lunged. Rusty met him halfway. Fists flew. Gravel scattered. The fight was dirty, desperate, like two dogs locked in a moonlit yard. June screamed, but didn't run this time. She grabbed a piece of wood and swung, hard. The man went down. Rusty stood over him, chest heaving. The sheriff's car lights flared in the distance. It was over. Weeks passed. The man was behind bars. The town was quieter. June's music grew brighter, richer, like a river freed from a dam. Rusty fixed up the porch swing, painted the fence, and sometimes, at night, they'd sit out there together. She'd hum, he'd listen, and the world would feel right for a while. One evening, as the sun dipped low and turned the sky gold, June turned to him. Rusty, she said softly, I never thought I'd find peace here. But you held the door open till I could walk through. Rusty smiled, slow and easy. I didn't do nothing special. I just stayed. And under the wide southern sky, with the crickets singing and the cicadas buzzing, they sat in the hush of something new. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But it was real. And sometimes, that's more than enough. Their story became one folks whispered on porches, told in bars, sung in slow songs, about the woman who found her voice and the man who stood beside her like a steady tree. And that, as the old folks would say, is how Rusty and June stopped running and started living.